Welcome, everybody. And it's wonderful to see you all wherever you are in the world. And we do have quite an international gathering of people here. It's like a wonderful extended global family. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, before we started the call formally, there's a lot of love that's developed in this group over the recent years. And it's a wonderful, wonderful forum for us all to share and discuss and explore the subject matter that we all have an interest in this way. And long may this continue to thrive and blossom and prosper. So today we have a presentation by Frater Paul Stobbs. And the subject of the title of Frater Paul's talk today is The History and Tradition of the Cross. So thank you very much for your patience, by the way. We've started a little later than usual today because of technical difficulties, but we're ready to go now. So I'd like to hand over. I'm just going to pin your image to the main screen here, Paul, for the purpose of the recording. And the floor's yours, Paul. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be at the MSG and a great pleasure to present my paper. So my paper is The History and Tradition and Symbolism of the Cross. So the cross is surely the most potent of all Christian symbols. It is the representation of Christ's crucifixion, his crowning glory, and certainly his greatest miracle. It's an event recorded in the four canonical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament, and also attested to by countless other sources. It is the most iconic symbol that is recognised by nearly all around the globe. But despite its historical and social value, what does the cross represent, and why does it still hold a special place for believers and non-believers alike? During this paper, I aim to show how the cross appears to serve a dual purpose. Firstly, as a reminder of the suffering of Christ, but also as a powerful symbol of forgiveness. The pain and humility endured by Jesus serving to remove the sin of humanity. His act of atonement, the ultimate sign of his love for mankind. I shall also attempt to prove how the cross carries a mystique far greater than any one tradition, and how its message is as relevant in today's world as it has ever been. So let us start, if we may, with the crucifixion of Christ. Now, as a method of capital punishment under the Roman Empire, crucifixion on the cross was effective and brutal. It was also a well-established routine, and the Romans had specific military teams, often led by centurions, to carry out the task of crucifixions. Many local soldiers who had joined the Roman army auxiliaries were also selected. The prisoners were often led through the streets naked, having been scourged, whipped, and stripped, usually among main roads outside the city walls for purposes of hygiene control. To ensure the prisoner did not die prior to crucifixion, someone from the crowd would be commandeered to carry the cross to the place of execution. And it was this role that Simon of Cyrene carried out during Jesus' own crucifixion. Those who suffered this fate not only died in excruciating pain, often from a combination of constrained blood circulation and organ failure, but also of asphyxiation, as the body could not support its own weight in this position. Now, crucifixion was usually reserved for political and religious prisoners, with a notice or titulus placed above their head, stating their name and crime. It was considered the most humiliating of deaths, and was usually reserved for the lowest class of people, such as slaves, with the only relief offered during the crucifixion process being that of hastening the victim's agonizing death by the shattering of their legs, usually with an iron bar. A combination of shock and an inability to inhale, bringing that torturous process to a quicker close. In Christ's own crucifixion, he was firstly tried before the Jewish religious leaders, Annas, Caiaphas, and the Sanhedrin, and next before the Roman authorities, namely Pontius Pilate and then Herod, before being sent back to Pilate, who offered the prisoner Barabbas to be crucified instead, before finally Jesus was sentenced to death. He was then brutally tortured and whipped before being nailed to the cross and crucified. And as mentioned before, the demeaning process of crucifixion was usually reserved for those whom the authorities specifically wanted to humiliate in front of the general public. And this served as a method of keeping law and order, as this would have been a very public sign of the fate that would have been bestowed on others who dared to commit a similar crime. So after his apparent death on the cross in this most brutal of fashion, Jesus then descends further into hell for 3 days and 3 nights. In what became known as the harrowing of hell, Jesus descended into the underworld to bring salvation to the souls held captive there since the beginning of the world. The harrowing of hell is somewhat forgotten within the teachings of modern Protestant and Catholic belief, but still forms a major part of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And it would appear to answer the question of how salvation was brought to those who died prior to Jesus' arrival. And as was stated in the New Testament, the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead. So Christ's descent into hell is referred to in great detail in the Gospel of Nicodemus. This book appears in the Gospel of John and is largely written in Greek. In this account, having learned of their mysterious return, Joseph took the chief priests Annas, Caiaphas, Joseph, Nicodemus, and Gamaliel to Jerusalem to meet a man named Simeon and his 2 sons, Charinus and Lynthius, who it was said had recently returned from the dead and been raised again by Jesus. They were interviewed by Joseph and the priests, and we are told that the men who had risen, having heard this, made upon their faces the sign of the cross. So this aforementioned making upon their faces the sign of the cross prior to making their statements was essentially the men swearing an oath, and it again shows how potent a symbol the sign of the cross was for them. They then began their account of what had happened during the descent. The 3 men were in Hades with all of those who had fallen asleep since the beginning of the world, and there rose a light as if of the sun and shone into these dark regions. Our father Abraham was united with the patriarchs and the prophets who said, "This light is from the Father and from the Son and from the Holy Spirit, about who I prophesied you when yet alive." Jesus then commands them to lift up the gates of hell, and prophesied by David and Hosea. And the brass gates and iron bars holding them shut immediately shatter, and Jesus, the King of Glory, came in the form of a man. Whereupon Hades says that through cross and death thou art to inherit the whole world, and all that thou had gained through the tree of knowledge, all hast thou lost through the tree of the Holy Cross. So these references to the cross again appear as a redemptive symbol of the highest significance. Jesus, in a highly important passage, outstretches his arm to Adam and raises him, saying, "Behold, I again raise you all up through the tree of the cross." Simeon then also says, "The Saviour blesses Adam with the sign of the cross on his forehead, and did this also to the patriarchs and the prophets and the martyrs." And Jesus also saves a lowly man, a robber and thief in the world, who had been crucified on a cross next to him. And whereupon, after dying, the man carried his cross to paradise. And after being brought up to the gates of Eden, we are told that the flaming sword, seeing the sign of the cross, opened to me, and I went in. And these passages, and in particular the last few quotations, again show the power of the sign of the cross. They show that it's of the highest religious and spiritual order, with the true message of Christ, ultimate salvation imbued in this highly significant and highly powerful symbol. So the harrowing of hell is itself a major chapter in the Christian doctrine, as well as in the Gospel of Nicodemus. It is also alluded to in the first epistle of Peter. For Christ being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which he also went and preached unto the spirits in prison. So it takes place in a period of time over the 3 days between Jesus being crucified on Friday and first appearing to Mary Magdalene in the resurrection. And it also had an enormous influence and impact on many theological minds, such as acclaimed author C.S. Lewis, who stated in his letter of 1860 to Mrs. Sutherland, he said, "We understand that Jesus did go to hell to preach to those who came before the cross. We understand that he saved some of them and brought them to heaven with him." So the harrowing of hell directly corresponds with the Old Testament story from the book of Jonah, and Jonah's own 3 days and nights inside the belly of the whale. At this point, it is relevant briefly to discuss the story of Jonah and the whale. So Jonah was a prophet who rejected God's mission and was cast overboard in a storm and was swallowed by a great whale. After 3 days and nights, he was rescued by God, whereupon he went to Nineveh and foretold their doom and destruction, unless the Ninevehers repented and were humble to God. The people repented and were spared by God, who did not carry out his punishment. And the important factor here is that the Nineveh were an ancient enemy of the Israelis, and the moral of the story shows the mercy of God who spared them. So if we link this back to the New Testament, in the book of Matthew, Jesus says, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, for none will be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. But just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so for 3 days and 3 nights the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth." So what is the sign of the prophet Jonah? Well, Jesus explicitly references it here as a metaphor for his impending crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. He does this in response to the Pharisees, who demand proof that he is the Messiah. In fact, he says there will be no sign except the sign of Jonah. The 3 days and nights of his future harrowing of hell, mirroring the 3 days and nights Jonah's in the whale, and fulfilling an Old Testament prophecy of God. This metaphor symbolizes the bringing of light to darkness and of life to death. However, despite the obvious connection of Jesus fulfilling prophecy of the sign of Jonah, it is still the role of Jesus as the Messiah that would seem to imply it's of greater significance as an act of salvation. So, as discussed in the earlier passages from the Gospel of Nicodemus, one of the first of those souls saved by Jesus was Adam. This again is a highly significant moment, as it shows us here Jesus completing the redemption of Adam's original sin. In Martinez de Pasquale's unfinished masterpiece from 1773, the Treatise on the Reintegration of Beings, translated in 2023 by Michael Osborne, we see that Christ the Repairer's atonement for Adam's prevarication is the key tenet in the treatise. Adam, the original rogue man, was deceived by a falling spirit into misusing his God-given free will powers to create material life without God's dispensation. Adam made this form against the will of the Creator. So Adam thereby falls into the sin of pride. This rebelling against God is seen as the original sin, and an estrangement from God follows Adam seeking to create material life. And after this terrible event, Adam recognized even more strongly the greatness of his crime. Adam immediately grieved for his fault. This original sin was transmitted continuously in mankind from generation to generation. However, as we can see, this original sin could only be broken by Jesus, the Son of God, born without sin. The Word, or Son of God, reverted all his powers and verities and was conceived without physical involvement to become the divine man. So in this sense, Jesus could not have inherited the curse of Adam, since he had no human father and the chain was broken. In fact, as shown in Michael Osborne's introduction to the treatise, available from Rose Circle Publications, we see the power of the cross once again as a redemptive symbol. The expiation of sin, i.e. purification, achieved through the cross at Calvary. So by now, we can see Jesus symbolically restoring the balance and righting that first sin of man. And this was an idea also explored in some detail in the New Testament. And indeed, this was when Jesus' finest of miracles happened. He was resurrected to walk amongst us once again as the true Son of God. The resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is gone into heaven and is on the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers being made subject unto him. So the resurrection is indeed the most important concept and true foundation of all Christian doctrine. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. And perhaps the concept of heaven as we understand it today begins with this chapter of Christianity, and in particular with the resurrection of Jesus. For as we can see with these Old Testament quotes, and indeed as a concept itself within the Old Testament, heaven appeared to be a physical realm, an actual place within the universe itself. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Praise him, ye heaven of heavens, and ye water that be above the heavens. Let them praise the name of the Lord, for he commanded, and they were created. So as we can see, the physical acts of Jesus' harrowing of hell and his resurrection are both inextricably linked to the sign of the cross and the cross itself. And indeed, it's also worth noting that the doctrine of the Catholic Church, as taken from the Catechism of the Catholic Church in 92, now dictates that by his death and resurrection, Jesus Christ has opened heavens to us. The life of the blessed consists in the full and perfect possessions of the fruit of the redemption accomplished by Christ. Heaven is the blessed community of all who are perfectly incorporated into Christ. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about the history of the cross. It can trace its roots back thousands of years. The Egyptian ankh cross was also known as the key of life, and it dates back to the first dynastic period in Egypt, circa 3150 to 2613 BC. As a hieroglyph, it is believed to represent life, fertility, or an earthly journey, and the ankh cross certainly had a deep meaning to many Egyptians, being worn as an amulet and often placed at the neck of mummies to invoke the protection of Isis. It also appeared in many tomb paintings and was used in the worship of the god Aten. The ankh cross, one of the oldest symbols in ancient Egypt, was linked with both immortal and afterlife existence. Countless ancient Egyptian artworks have been found in tombs that appear to show the gods handing the ankh cross to the pharaohs or holding ankhs to the nose of the recently deceased pharaohs. This symbolically signifies the breathing in of life, perhaps most famously Horus, the sun god, offering the ankh to the pharaoh Ramesses II at the temple of Ramesses in Abydos, dating to 1275 BC. Now, the ankh was often added to the sarcophagi of pharaohs, symbolizing the gift of eternal life to the deceased royalty. The ankh serving as the key to the gates of death, and many statues exist of pharaohs holding the ankh cross in each hand, with their arms crossed over their chest. Indeed, Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Budge claimed it derived from the belt buckle of the goddess Isis and linked it to the symbol of Jet, the knot of Isis or girdle of Isis, a potent symbol of fertility. While modern scholar Adele Nosdar states that the ankh represents the male and female genitalia, the sun coming over the horizon, and the union of heaven and earth. Now, during the Middle Kingdom of 2040 to 1782 BC, the ankh was widely used, and a number of hand mirrors have been found in the shape of the ankh. The association of the ankh with the mirror was no chance occurrence. Egyptians believed the afterlife was a mirror image of life on earth, and that mirrors were thought to contain magical properties. Perhaps this was the reason why it is believed the ankh cross was adopted by the early Egyptian Coptic Christians, who regarded it as a symbol of Christ's promise of eternal life through his death and resurrection. To the early Gnostics, the whole universe, metaphysical and material, was contained within and could be expressed and described by the digits of the number 10, the Pythagorean decad. The decad brings all these digits back to unity and ends the Pythagorean table. Hence, this figure, unity within zero, was the symbol of the deity of the universe. It is claimed that the early Gnostic science was built on knowledge of the square, and represented within the square was Sige, Bethos, Nous, and Aletheia. These translate as silence, depth, spiritual soul or mind, and truth. And the Gnostics had embedded these ideas within a Tau cross and merged it with their word or concepts of Christos or Christos, an ancient Latin or Greek slave word meaning kindly or useful, or he who became, for certain purposes, a willing candidate for a series of tortures, mental and physical. This represented the cross, or the 7 which preceded the 10 digits of the decad. It was studied from the universals of Plato and the inductive method of Aristotle, and the two systems were brought together by Pythagoras. In Plato's The Timaeus, he discusses the 4 elements within the physical world or cosmos as having bodily form and being necessarily visible and tangible. They consist of the solids fire and earth, and the demiurge, also known as the creator or craftsman, additionally created 2 intermediaries, air and water, to combine them. Plato called these elements stoicheions. In Aristotle's On Generation and Corruption, he relates each of the four elements to two of the sensible qualities. So the element of air, also called wind, is associated with warmth and wetness and have the colours blue and white or grey. Air represents the Holy Spirit and the source of life. It contrasts with the element of air, which has the properties of cold and dryness and the colours brown and green. It is a symbol for physical sensations and movements. The fire element is associated with heat and dryness and evokes such emotions as love, passion, compassion, hate, anger, and fiery emotions. It is considered to represent the colours red and orange and be masculine and male energy. Again, it contrasts with the element of water, which within alchemical knowledge represents intuition and female feminine energy. It's associated with mercury and wetness, moisture and cold, and its colours blue. And within Western archaeology, the four classical elements are used in connection with the astrological charts and horoscopes. The 12 zodiac signs are divided into four elements. The fire signs being Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The earth signs Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. The air signs Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And the water signs Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Now, Plato held the cross central in his view of creation. And in the Timaeus, he states, "And God made the soul out of the following elements. And on this wise, this entire compound, he divided lengthways into two parts, which he joined to one another at the centre, like the letter X, and bent them into a circular form, connecting them with themselves and each other at the point opposite to the original meeting point. And comprehending them in a uniform revolution upon the same axis, he made the one the outer and the other the inner circle." And the view of Paul Carus in his study of Plato is that his idea of the soul of the universe as being in the shape of the letter, which is a cross on edge, is perhaps primarily due to the sacredness which ancient religious traditions attach to this symbol. In order to appreciate the importance of Plato's thought of the X, the cross on edge, we must bear in mind that his conception of this God as the universe, as a deity, as the firstborn of all creatures, and the created type of all other gods and beings, comes close to the Christian conception of God the Son, in whom God the Father revealed himself. And again, while Plato saw the figure of two intersecting lines as deeply symbolic, he saw the actual method of crucifixion and its implementation as the most barbaric punishment. They will tell you that the just man who is thought unjust will be scourged, racked, bound, will have his eyes burnt out, and at last, after suffering every kind of evil, he will be crucified. Although, as we've seen, the slanting cross was a religious symbol in ancient Greece, and the cross torch plays an important part in the Eleusinian mysteries as a symbol of resurrection. So the cross was thereby a symbol that was well known and indeed had significant spiritual and religious value in ancient Greece, a fact that Plato and many other philosophers would have been all too well aware. Plato may in fact have been influenced by the legend of Prometheus, who brought the great gift of fire to mankind and was subsequently punished by the gods by being crucified on Caucasus before being eventually rescued by Heracles. This image of the man-god Prometheus crucified on the cross for his love of mankind must have had a deep impact on the psyche of Plato and on his interpretation of the cross and its religious significance. Again, Paul Carus sums up the significance of the cross to Plato and Platonism best. The two ideas of the cross, one as the instrument of torture, as an emblem of the ignominious death of the perfectly righteous man, and two as the intersecting lines denoting the symbol of God incarnate, are both contained within Plato. So the idea of the cross symbolically representing the four elements is an idea expanded on in great detail by 16th century author, mathematician, philosopher, occultist, and magician John Dee. In his book, The Monus Hieroglyphica, which is often cited as the most obscure book ever written by an Englishman, but also one of the most brilliant, Dee merges alchemy, astrology, mysticism, and metaphysics with the creation of a glyph, as shown here. Through the glyph, which includes at its centre the cross, the reader is taken on an esoteric journey via 24 theorems, through which Dee explains the deep symbolism of each thought and item contained therein. and the interconnectedness of these symbols to the wider world in which we inhabit. D presents the glyph itself ultimately as a microcosm of the entire cosmos, and the idea of the practical and theoretical is united in the one theory. The whole structure of reality is contained within the Monas Hieroglyphica, and he expresses this idea of symbiosis and ontology as being united as one, while forging an early form of sacred geometry. D also, and more pertinently, goes on to explain the importance of the cross within the glyph in Theorem 16, where he says, "From this, it seems to me we establish our decad of the cross, for this is placed at the summit of all mysteries, and it follows that the cross is the hieroglyphic sign of perfection." D further expounds on the symbolism of the cross, imagining a straight line bisecting the cross to make two equal parts, similar in shape to the Roman numeral V, as used by the Roman philosophers to symbolize the number 5. He further espouses how it is composed of 4 equal right angles, and goes on to say that by a parallel method following their verbal force, with this same cross, we recognize with supreme admiration that it is from here that light is derived. Lux, the final word of the magistrate, by the union and conjunction of the ternary within the unity of the word. So it's clear from this book how much D himself, one of the most widely read and enlightened men of his day, held the cross in such high regard. In D's hieroglyph, the cross represents the elements. D's hieroglyph represents the whole of being, both macro and microcosm. This can be applied to every hieroglyph. The cipher always stands for the whole of being, even if it consists of one triangle, the singular, simple, and most frequently used figure. Now, in Norse mythology, the cross was representative of the world tree Yggdrasil, a mighty and mythical ash tree that gave structure and definition to the cosmos. Revered by gods and mortals alike, Yggdrasil held a position of enormous importance and was revered as the holiest of locations for the gods. It was the place where wisdom was sought and offered. Indeed, in Norse mythology, that mighty leader Odin, who suffered for humanity, was hanged from the tree of Yggdrasil, and this could in fact be seen to mirror the suffering of Christ at the crucifixion. There are many similarities between Norse mythology and Christianity, and this may be because by the time early Christianity had spread to the Northern Europeans and to the Nordic people, the biblical tales had become woven into the very fabric of those early Norse myths and legends, which in turn became the basis of Norse mythology. It is a clear appropriation of the Christ story. Perhaps the incorporation of the Christ story into the Nordic myths explains why the northern peoples were notoriously averse to convert to Christianity. Unknown even to themselves, they had already embraced something of the gospel, though they had mapped Christ onto Odin. The gospel story, even changed and adapted by Norsemen, had power. In fact, some Nordic traditions, such as gift giving, evergreen decorations, and Yule logs, may have in turn influenced certain Christmas traditions. In Norse society, Yule marked the beginning of winter and was a time of feasting and merriment. Odin, the great Nordic god, also known as the Allfather, was the god of wisdom, poetry, and war. It was also Odin who led the wild hunt during Yule time, and the Nordic tradition of leaving out food in winter months to appease the wild huntsman may have influenced the modern Christian tradition of mince pies and carrots for Santa and the reindeer. And like Santa Claus, Odin is depicted as a bearded man in a red cloak, riding through the night sky in his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, delivering presents to children. In fact, many of Norway's historic stave churches blended together Christian and Norse or Viking symbols. Intricately carved portals and church roofs, often retelling ancient tales depicting dragons, snakes, and Thor's hammer. This syncretism, or blending together of different beliefs and ideologies, go to show that in essence, the Norse were partially Christian long before the conversion and partially pagan long after the conversion. Now, the cross as a Christian symbol was first adopted by the Roman Emperor Flavius Valerius Constantinus, otherwise known as Constantine the Great, emperor from 307 to 337 AD. In the early 4th century, it was Constantine who first legalized Christianity throughout the Roman Empire, and it was he who led many excavations of the Holy Land and built the martyrium over the site thought to be the location of Jesus' tomb. Constantine had been greatly affected by a vision of the cross, or to be precise, a Chi-Rho symbol. This monogram, called a Christogram, combines the first two letters of Christ in Greek. The symbol, like the cross, was an ancient sign of Christianity, dating back to the 1st century. In 312 AD, on the eve of his great battle with Maxentius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, for the right to be the sole emperor of Rome, and in what can only be described as a pivotal moment in the history of the Western world, Constantine received his vision. Constantine the Great recalled his vision on the night before battle and remembered that he and his troops had seen a cross of light in the sky, bearing the command, "In this sign you will conquer." And so this former devotee of the sun god Sol Invictus attributed his victory to the god of the Christians, a religious sect that had suffered appalling persecution at the hands of many of Constantine's predecessors. In adopting Christianity, he gave it the legitimacy that would see it acquire the status of Rome's state religion and change the course of Roman and European history, and consequently that of the world. Constantine was also told to put the cross on his shield and the shield of his soldiers, which he duly did. He then won a remarkable victory and adopted Christ as his conservator, or patron deity. And soon after, and in perhaps one of the most important moments in the growth of Christianity, was the introduction of the Constantinata, a Byzantine coin minted by the Emperor Constantine. Here the cross featured for the very first time on a monetary coin. This may be the moment where Constantine unmistakably adopted the cross and Christianity itself as the religion and symbol of the Roman Empire. Although Constantine's conversion to Christianity was a gradual one, the conversion of the Roman Empire was also a gradual process, marked by frequent struggles with paganism and superstition. In fact, there appears to be a period of crossover in similar fashion to how the Roman gods had absorbed the Greek gods, and they in turn the Egyptian and Canaanite gods of earlier times. These were passed from one culture to another, sometimes keeping the same name, sometimes receiving a different one. Characteristics of the god were combined and reassigned and separated again. Did a similar process occur when the Romans became Christians? The cross appears from then on in most minted coins throughout the Roman Empire and across the Western world. And this would have been a great way to easily transmit the message and the symbolism of the cross far and wide throughout the empire. In fact, even after the fall of Rome, the Byzantine Empire continued to transmit the message of Christ, and indeed, in the reign of Justinian II, engravers for the first time depicted Jesus on a coin. This development was probably delayed until this late date because of the iconoclastic struggles in which some elements of the church posed images on the basis of the prohibition of the second commandment: "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." The Tau cross is one recognisable to many amongst us. It is believed by many to be the style of cross that Jesus himself was crucified on, and is seen as symbolic of the Old Testament, being the 19th Greek letter and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It was specifically connected with the Franciscan order, and it is also directly mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. In this book, God has his angel, St. Gabriel, mark the foreheads of those to be saved with the symbol of the Tau, destroying all those non-believers, saving all those marked with the Tau. And the Lord said unto him, "Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." The Tau represents salvation and life, and St. Francis is believed to have used a Tau amulet to protect against diseases and plagues. He used it as a signature on his letters and as a seal and coat of arms. And it's believed that the Franciscans today, when wearing their habit with their arms outstretched, become a living Tau. The true origins within the Christian framework may, however, be even older. The Aurea Legenda, or Golden Legend, is a collection of 103 hagiographies by Jacobus de Veragian. And included within it is a myth or a legend whereby Adam, nearing the end of his life, requests his son Seth to embark on a pilgrimage to the Garden of Eden to secure the oil of mercy promised by God. Upon arrival, Seth found a great tree whose branches stretched up to the heavens and roots stretched down to the depths of hell. The tree was in the form of a cross. Seth secured 3 seeds from the tree which he returned back with, and on Adam's death he planted them in his mouth. The tree grew and infused with the body of Adam. Many years later, Noah dug the tree up by the roots and took it with him on the ark and planted the tree at Mount Calvary. This later was the burning bush, which Moses had his vision, cut his rod from, and brought water from the stone. The tree, many years later, being used to make the very cross on which Jesus was crucified. So, according to Alexander Lyss, a specialist in symbolism research and dream psychology, the cross is a powerful and universal symbol that carries a multitude of meanings. It serves as a symbol of intersection, balance, hope, and spiritual connection. In general symbolism, it signifies conflicting aspects of the self or points of decisions in dreams and features prominently in myths and folklore around the world. Despite its varied interpretation, the cross consistently stands as a symbol of profound significance, reflecting the human experience in its many dimensions and complexities. And if we now explore the ideas of that great psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung, we can see that Jung wrote extensively on many areas of Christianity throughout his career, and in particular on the cross. He believed the importance of the cross to the Western world, and in particular to the human experience, could not be understated. Jung, himself a Christian, saw the cross as follows. The cross, which lies at the centre of the Christian story and is a quaternity symbol, affirms the centrality of brokenness, evil, and limitation in the human experience, and thus is compatible with quaternitarian theology. This sense of the quaternity is a key component of not only the cross, but of its relationship with the elements, and in particular, Jung saw the complete wholeness of being as a circle. The ideal of completeness is the circle or sphere, and its natural minimal division is a quaternity. And Jung saw the quaternity itself as being representation of the four elements, four seasons, four castes, and four ways of spiritual development, as well as the four psychological functions of thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Quaternity symbolizes completeness in distinction from perfection, as symbolized by Trinity. So Jung's view was that the Trinity, or Trinitarian belief, was itself perfection in three parts. So what are the missing parts of the quaternity? Well, this missing part, Jung felt, was evil itself, or brokenness in the human experience. Trinitarian theology itself tends to lead to the denial of evil's power, as it does not form part of that perfection, but it is present within that quaternal symbol of the cross. In the form of the crucifixion of Christ, presence of evil is thus purified by Jesus. Perhaps described best. Through the Christ crucified between the two thrives, man gradually attained knowledge of his shadow and its duality. So, in conclusion, therefore, the symbol of the cross itself can be seen as a gateway between two worlds, the ancient world afterlife and the physical and material realm, both incorporated within the one symbol. Perhaps the cross's greatest power is to act as a guide or medium that can bring us towards a portal or bridge, linking together the conscious and the unconscious mind. A fusion of both these parts of the mind, the in and the out, creating the whole, a perfect oneness, man and God joined together in a potent symbol of eternal love. The cross, though, can also be a reminder of self-sacrifice, a poignant symbol to help others, family, loved ones, and society as a whole. Something truly ingrained in the very fabric of our soul. The cross, therefore, is held aloft as the ultimate symbol of attainment that none can reach, but all strive for. The very spirit of Jesus that we should all seek to live up to each and every day. To some, it represents the very spirit of Jesus himself, and of that personal attachment and link to one's God, our own spiritual guide helping us on our journey through life, navigating each and every one of us through what sometimes feels like the darkest abyss, to ensure we reach the light of our goals, whatever they may be, bringing us ultimately to that sacred of places in the afterlife. So despite all the myths and legends that we've heard, that humble and most holy of Christian symbols, the cross, that we Fratres hold in special regard, should act, I believe, as a guide for a well-lived life, one spent in service to others. For that sacrifice that we all make daily should be seen as carrying out the true message of Christ. For the cross, which acted as a gateway between worlds for Christ, when its sides are folded in, becomes a cube or block, and that block or ashlar must be used in the resurrection of our own temple, beautiful and solid, which contains within it the very essence of self-sacrifice, ensuring that Jesus' love reaches each and every one of us, the true magic of the cross. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
One moment, please, Frater Paul. I'm just going to unpin and we'll stop the screen sharing for now. 1 second, please. And okay, I'm going to remove the pin and we're going to go to speaker view here. So firstly, Frater Paul, on behalf of the Metropolitan Study Group, I want to congratulate you on that paper. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
That so much work's gone into that and care. That I found that very, very impressive and very moving. For me personally, I've had a strong, how can I put this, an aversion to the symbol of the cross of suffering, because of how I feel that symbol has been used by the church to encourage people to feel ashamed of themselves and that people are sinners and that we all deserve to suffer. Now, I also recognize that it's through our personal suffering that we learn and grow. But I have a strong aversion to the way that symbol has been used to control people and to make people feel disempowered and to feel ashamed of, or guilty or not worthy. And however, your paper really reignited for me just how rich that symbol actually is. And the fact that you linked it with all of the other traditions in the way that you did was tremendous. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to hand over, as we usually do, open this up to questions, comments and observations from everybody. And the first one is dear Frater Alex, who's joining us from Peru. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Sheen. Paul, I just want to say that was an absolutely fantastic paper. Beautifully researched, beautifully presented. And in fact, I would like to speak to Neil Sars, who's the Secretary General, and see if we can have that paper presented at High Council next year. I think it completely encapsulates the spirit of what we are trying to do as Rosicrucians, how we're trying to live our life, how we try and use these symbols for transformation and transmutation. And I think it would be absolutely perfect as something to be presented at High Council, because at High Council we have at least 4 or 5 papers that are presented over the course of the weekend. And I just think this perfectly surmises the work that we try to do in the SRIA. So I want to just say thank you. It's such a joy. I mean, I'm in Peru at the moment, and I thought, what should I do this morning? I'll log on to the MSG because I'm having breakfast. And to have had such a wonderful paper is one of the things that always I love about this study group is, you know, suddenly out of nowhere, an absolute gem appears, and that was just absolutely wonderful. And I just think that, as she mentioned, going through all the different traditions, realizing how powerful and how transformative this symbolism. And I've always looked at, as she mentioned, the suffering of Christ on the cross. I've always looked at that symbol as the transmutation of this dimension, using the cross as the 4 elements, and Jesus as the representation of the physical world and the transmutation of what our path is on the physical world in relationship to the 4 elements, and the use of those elements in the more ethereal space. But I just wanted to say that was absolutely fantastic and truly fantastic.
Thank you, Frater Alex. That's lovely to hear that, and that's a huge honour, and thank you so much. And exactly that, I'm trying to bring as many ideas as possible because it's such a wide-ranging subject. it's such a wide-ranging area that I try to bring as many things as I could, and it's absolutely an honor to hear that. Thank you so much, and I'm glad I brought some light and some joy to you. Thank you.
Okay, for people who are here maybe for the first time, although I do think that we're pretty much a group of people who have attended these meetings on many occasions. So as usual, if you wish to comment, please raise your hand via the reactions tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And over to you, Anthony.
Hello. Great presentation. It covered, I think, every aspect of the symbolism of the cross. I congratulate you, brother, for this presentation. I have a small addition and a question. First, the cross, it represents the four elements and the quintessence at the same time, because it has 4 points at the extremities and the point in the intersection in the middle. So these are 5 points which could be linked to the pentacle or the quintessence, which is the 5th element, which is the ether, air, water, earth, and fire. Or it is linked with the name Yehoshua, where Shin, the fiery mother letter, is in the middle, where the tetragrammaton is on the extremities, and it forms the pentagrammaton. My question is, in the alchemical symbolism, you see the cross when it is solo, it represents earth or life, or to say so. But when the cross is at the bottom or on the top, it's like when we're talking about Venus, the symbol of Mercury, where we have a circle on top of the cross and a crescent moon. What does this exactly mean in reference to the cross? Does it mean that in the symbolism of Venus, when the circle is on top of the cross, that the soul is governing the matter? Or in terms of, or when we're talking in Mercury's case, does it the soul and the mind are governing the matter? What is the relation between these elements in the cross when we are talking alchemically? And thank you again for this amazing presentation.
No problem, thank you. I had a little problem with the audio there. I couldn't hear that question.
The symbolism of Venus puts
Yeah.
a circle at the top of the cross,
Yeah.
and Mercury puts a symbol at the
Yes.
bottom of the cross.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any significance in that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I do, and it's an area I'd love to explore more and to look into a lot deeper. And perhaps when I present the paper again, I could include a lot more of these elements into it, undoubtedly. But yeah, that's a fascinating question, and I think it opens up lots of different areas of symbolism and symbology and all kind of traditions. So it's definitely an area that I will definitely look into a lot more. Absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Please, anybody else, if you could raise the hand.
A question from me here at Atlantis, Sheen.
Go ahead, please, Rob.
Fantastic talk. Thank you very, very much. All of this, we're here as Rosicrucians. Yeah. So given all of that you've drawn together in this kind of perennial tradition, which I think is a beautiful way of looking at the cross. What are your thoughts on the rose cross?
Yeah, again, yeah, you're right. The rose cross element that I haven't included too much in there, but yeah.
What's your intuitive thought?
Well, obviously, this symbol of the rose and the cross combined together is, you know, and the rose meaning secrecy and the cross bringing it together as well is really a deep area to study, and probably too deep to study in a 40-minute paper. But these are areas that, again, I'd love to research even more. I mean, my own journey, just to explain first, as a Rosicrucian, I'm a Theoricus at the moment, so I've kind of gone up to that grade 2. So I'm looking to explore more and more and deeper, and you know, I think the journey of writing a paper is about finding knowledge and digging for as much knowledge as possible. Yeah. So yeah, it's something that I'm really keen to explore further. But maybe
a fruitful way of looking at it is if the cross is the quaternity, then the rose can be the quintessence, right? So that's kind of an interesting path to explore in more depth. But there's many different interpretations of the rose cross. That's what makes it such an everlasting symbol for the last 500 plus years. It is a very, very deep mystical symbol. So I think that what you've given everybody is the foundation to then say, with all of this foundation on the cross, which you've really laid out beautifully,
Thank you.
then what is the rose emerging from the center of the cross mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's an answer. That's a question we all have to answer ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That lotus wisdom for
Exactly. There's a comment here as well, Sheen.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. It was really well laid out.
Thank you.
Perfect. I heard that the rose represented human consciousness expanding, opening and closing, which is a nice thought to put with that.
Definitely, that sort of unflowering of wisdom as it unflowers is a beautiful thing, because knowledge is like that, isn't it? You don't learn it straight away. You as things unflower, you absorb that knowledge until it becomes a beautiful flower, and a bit like a flower, or let's say a rose growing, and it comes through, and that wisdom is something you can learn over a lifetime, isn't it? And yeah, it's a lovely thought. That's fantastic. And I guess maybe there's a link there to the lotus flower from
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
Alchemically, definitely.
Yeah. But it leads to so many good questions, and kind of why I wanted to write a paper on the subject, because there's so much to talk about. There's so many interesting areas. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else, please? Anybody else joining us on the call from wherever you might be in the world, please feel free. Step forward. Brig, over to you, Brig. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane, and thank you, Paul, for a fascinating a presentation. My brain is reeling, and I must apologise. I'm on overload. You mentioned syncretism, and I think this demonstrates the universality of the symbolism of the cross, and you mentioned obviously the Norse tradition. I do feel, however, we must beware the way in which some Christian traditions have utilized this symbolism. And I would go on to say syncretism. It could be a possible subject for a presentation in itself. As some of you know, I've been a very long-standing member of the Theosophical Society in England. So to a certain extent, my views may well be coloured by the teachings of theosophy, and certainly of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And I would want to bore you here with an entry in the Theosophical glossary, which Blavatsky wrote about the Calvary cross. She says, "This form of cross does not date from Christianity. It was known and used for mystical purposes thousands of years before our era. It formed part and parcel of the various rituals in Egypt and Greece, in Babylon and India, as well as in China, Mexico, and Peru. It is a cosmic as well as a physiological or phallic symbol. That it existed among all the heathen nations is testified to by Tertullian. Quote, how doth the Athenian Minerva differ from the body of a cross? He queries. The origin of your gods is derived from figures moulded on a cross. All those rows of images on your standards are the appendages of crosses. Those hangings on your banners are the robes of crosses." And the fiery champion was right. The Tor, or T, is the most ancient of all forms, and the cross, or the tat, as ancient. The crux ansata, the cross with a handle, is in the hands of almost every god, including Baal and the Phoenician Astarte. The qua crampone, forgive my pronunciation, is the Indian swastika. It has been exhumed from the lowest foundations of the ancient site of Troy, and it appears on Etruscan and Chaldean relics of antiquity. As Mrs. Jameson shows, quote, the ankh of Egypt was the crutch of St. Anthony and the cross of St. Philip. The labarum of Constantine was an emblem long before in Etruria. Osiris had the labarum for his sign. Horus appears sometimes with the long Latin cross. The Greek pectoral cross is Egyptian. It was called by the fathers the devil's invention before Christ. The crux ansata is upon the old coins of Tarsus, as the Maltese upon the breast of an Assyrian king. The cross of Calvary, so common in Europe, occurs on the breasts of mummies. It was suspended round the necks of sacred serpents in Egypt. Strange Asiatic tribes bringing tribute in Egypt are noticed with garments studded with crosses. And Sir Gardner Wilkinson dates this picture or whatever. Finally, Typhon, the evil one, is chained by a cross. You have opened Pandora's box, Paul. What have you got to say about that?
That was absolutely beautiful and brilliant, and so much knowledge there, and that's fantastic. And I think going back to what you first said about syncretism, that's a really complex issue because cultures have always influenced other cultures, and I think the best ideas from each culture have been absorbed by the next culture on. And I think I touched on it briefly talking about Constantine, where the Romans absorbed the religion of old, who resolved the religion of old and before that. But that's really fascinating. And where was that extract from, by the way? What was the
that's a Theosophical glossary, which was first attributed in 1892 by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, she's brilliant.
I haven't, of course, academically researched the truth of those statements. So they are opinions, and she was a very divisive and controversial character. So these statements have to be verified, Paul.
Sure, but what it does show is it's a symbol that's as old as almost time, isn't it? And I mean, I think the Tau cross itself, almost that kind of T-shaped pillar, is a really influential, important symbol itself. And in fact, that T shape, that Tau shape, could be even older. It could go way back. I mean, there's evidence. I don't know if you're familiar with Göbekli Tepe and the Taz Tepe sites. They had these enormous T-shaped pillars, and perhaps they were symbols of the cross dating back thousands upon thousands of years. So as a symbol, it's as old as time and as old as man. And there is a theory, I don't know how true it is, that the original symbol of the cross actually represents two sticks that were crossed together to create fire. And perhaps that could even be the origin of it, way, way back. But I suppose we'll never know for sure, but certainly the symbol of the cross has influenced mankind from way back when. And we talked about it earlier, how that sign of the cross is almost used as a baton to beat down mankind and to say, you're all sinners and you're not worthy. And perhaps it's fluctuated from a symbol meaning many things through time. Who knows? But I think the knowledge that you brought there is absolutely fascinating and brilliant. And thank you,
Paul. I applaud your courage and even tackling this. Congratulations.
No, thank you so much. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Brig. Thanks ever so much. Just back to the what you were mentioning there, Paul, about the church's use of the symbolism of the cross of suffering. And as I mentioned earlier, I've had quite a strong reaction against that over many years, because my feeling is that if Christ was crucified and through that act of surrender and sacrifice relieved the burden of sin from humanity, then to, after that, encourage humanity to feel that they're constantly sinners is blasphemous.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
I do. I think, you know, that symbol of Christ's crucifixion actually should set mankind free and should allow us to grow and that love to spread and not be used, like you said, as a sort of as a symbol to be down. I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's
and also I'd like to pick up on what was said by Anthony earlier about the four corners or the four ends of, let's say, the equal armed cross, and that it implies the fifth or the quintessence, as Robert Gordon said as well, that if one were to fold up the Calvary cross and it becomes the cube, that it's through that the space within, when that's revealed, when it's unfolded, that we find the rose, really, that spiritual essence.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely, that rose that unflowers, that almost like the wisdom unflowering and gradual unfolding is it's a beautiful thing. And you know, like you say, with that sort of, like I alluded to in the paper, with that self-sacrifice that's contained within it, the love and the duty that we have to do for our fellow fratres and brethren, mankind as a whole. I think that's a really deep aspect, and we carry that with us because what it brings is love, and through that sort of toiling, through self-sacrifice, you can actually bring love to everybody. And I think that's a deep, important concept.
And as Anthony mentioned, with the tetragrammaton forming the four quarters, and then the sacred letter Shin of the pentagrammton in the center, it kind of alludes to the same thing, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So anybody else? Is there anyone else at the Atlantis bookstore who would like to?
Yeah, one more comment.
So I'm quite new in this esoteric life, but I've recently got very interested in the meaning of Enre with like the Jesus Christ crucifixion. I think in the Christian context it means Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum, but there's also the alchemical meaning of it, which is, I think, Igne Nitrum Renovator Integra, which is through fire nature renews itself. So I think it's quite interesting how the process of how he died, also the fact that he was put in a cave for like 3 days and then he disappeared, so represents the alchemical process of the metal and becoming gold. So I think that represents also achieving higher states of consciousness. I think it was mentioned in Rose and in its relation to the consciousness. So I think it's quite interesting, the alchemical aspect of
absolutely. And that's sort of Jesus overcoming those elements of nature himself by the act of crucifixion. He overcomes those elements to become the link and the bridge with, with the divine to mankind. I totally agree. It's a great question, a great point, and yeah, it's brilliant.
Thank you. One thing also I really appreciated is how you focused on the harrowing of hell. Yeah. That's something that is not really talked about very much, but it's hugely significant, the implications of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was one of the points I was thinking of. Like, it's something that, I mean, that should be a well-known part of the whole resurrection journey. I mean, if that process was supposed to be happening within those 3 days, I mean, what an important part of the message that, I mean, I'm going to put my hands up. I had not heard of the harrowing of hell until today. So, I mean, again, thank you, Paul. But that's an incredible part of, such an important part of that process of the transformation of darkness into light and the process of the resurrection. I mean, how has that suddenly been sort of scrubbed from the generic understanding of what that resurrective process is? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the term harrowing a harrow is an old English farm tool, a bit like a plough. And I like that kind of analogy with, you know, the plough, preparing the field for the land for planting. Basically, you've got Jesus going into hell and, you know, separating out the impurities and preparing mankind for, you know, for what's to come. And I love that concept. And yeah, you've got the 3 days there, which surely there's barely any mention of it, but it must be the most important time. So what happened there, and it is a key part in lots of sort of Eastern Orthodox Church and lots of other things. So I guess it's alluded to, isn't it, by the Apostle Peter? But yeah, it's a massive period of time at the most crucial time. So it's an area that, you know, I found fascinating to research. And yeah, it's the Gospel of Nicodemus was really kind of eye-opening to read and really made me crave even more. It was brilliant. Yeah, so I recommend, if you haven't read it, get stuck in and read it, because it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
Also, that reminds me of there's a book written by William Blake, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. He wrote it when he was 32, and I stumbled across it when I was 32 as well. Had a very big impact on me. And in that book, he turns upside down the common archetype of the angel and the devil. So the angel becomes, the angel's purpose is to seek to restrict and confine free-flowing, creative, passionate energy. And so the devil in that context symbolizes free-flowing, creative and passionate energy. And bearing in mind that William Blake was a deeply reverent soul and deeply spiritual. There's a small chapter in that book called The Proverbs of Hell. And at the beginning of it, it's a similar thing, really, to the harrowing, in as much as he says, one day I found myself wandering amidst the fires of hell. And so I thought to myself, just as when a person is exploring a foreign land, that each land contains its own inherent wisdom. Therefore, I sought to compile the proverbs of hell. Yeah, so, and it's very sharp, very short, sharp one-liners. One of them being, just as the caterpillar lays her eggs on the fairest of leaves, so the priest lays his curse on the fairest of joys.
Yeah.
Very, very strong. Another one, beautiful one, excess of sorrow laughs, excess of joy weeps.
Yeah,
like there's that cusp when a person's really full of sorrow and they end up laughing, or if they witness something that's so utterly magnificently beautiful, we weep. There's deep wisdom in that. I highly recommend that book. It's very thought-provoking.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and like you say, so precise and straight to the point with those one-liners. Fantastic, absolutely. Yeah. That's my next area of research, I think.
So over to you again, Brig.
Yes, thank you, Shane. Sorry to hog this, Paul. I was absolutely delighted that you chose the Norse tradition to embellish your presentation, because it's occurred to me over many years that surely our Norse ancestry is far closer to us than Middle Eastern, North American, Chinese, Indian, Buddhist, etc. Indeed, we owe several days of our week to the Norse tradition. So Odin hanging on the tree of life, Yggdrasil, and grasping at the end of that the wisdom of the runes, surely should speak to us. It's a simplistic story. We must die to our lower selves to be reborn. What do you feel about that analogy?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a definite contrast with, well, you know, similarities with Odin and Christ. And yeah, we have, you know, undoubtedly with the Scandinavian and the Northern Europeans people, there's a definite link, and it flows through nicely. And I think I think actually the Norse sun symbol itself is the circle with the four equidistant lines intersecting that central point, forming the cross in the center. And I guess because of the harsh Scandinavian climates, I mean, the actual appearance of the sun would have been absolutely a phenomenally important thing, bringing warmth, security, the ice melting, you know, plentiful food supply. It was a deity to the Nordic people, and yeah, 100% key and really important within the Nordic tradition. It's a great point again, Brig. Fantastic.
I think something this brings up is sorry, Sheen.
That's okay.
Something this brings up as well is this idea that when we see symbols throughout time and we see symbols throughout history, there's a lot of people who want to try and draw an influence link between those things, forgetting that there's a universality to the human condition.
Yes.
So the sun rises to every culture in the world, right? That juxtaposition of the horizon and the sun rising over it, that cross,
yes,
is a universal experience that is of utmost importance to humanity and life on this planet. And so I think there is something in, there's a lot of people who try and theorize, well, because there was a cross 5,000 years ago, that's the same cross that we see here, that's the same cross we see in the Norse. But I think there's more to be said actually about the universality of the human condition and how these symbols come up through us, that rather than just trying to draw those cultural links all the time, although they are there quite often, I think I find it more heartening to think of the fact that there is a universal experience here that comes through us in many, many different ways. And then we can see as well as that Christ is on the cross, that's the human being on this cross, right? This is again that unfolding of consciousness and Christ's message that we all have access to the divine. And this was a revolutionary message. The divine is not kept from you by priests or by hierarchies or by the government or by anything. It is within. And so I think this was the revolutionary message of Christ. And as much as we can find a lot of precedents to that symbolism, it is still just a breaking down of that old hierarchical order into one that is, again, universally accessible. And I think this is something that you were talking about before was actually misappropriated and misused by the church throughout a lot of history. But that message still remains in the message of Christ. And I think that is a very important part of it. So yeah, it's just that I think gathering all of this together is really important because it shows us that we are all human and we all have a shared experience. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. It's not who came first, who influenced what, who led to which. It's like, no, we are all here together experiencing this unfolding. And it is your birthright. It is all of our birthrights. And nobody can either give that to you or take it away from you.
Yeah, the human condition is relevant to everybody, isn't it? From way back in time as well. And I think that's beautifully put. Absolutely right. You know, that sort of Christ message within it is within us, and we can access that through the message, and whether it's through the symbol of the cross or through study of wisdom, whatever it is, you can tap into that and access that and realize it is within, and you can channel that through to bring that love and that joy through. I think it's a really powerful point. Yeah, it's lovely.
So also the universality, I think that's a wonderful point that Rob just raised there, that it's our birthright as human beings, that we all have that shared experience of the sun rising, for instance, and that's shared universally and always has been and always shall be. But I think that we have a duty, I think, toward the future of humanity, to really acknowledge, really take on board that universality, and that it's not only humanity but all sentient life is sacred and interconnected. It's that sacred interconnectedness of all life, which I feel strongly is likely to be the key that the more people who acknowledge that sacred universality, the more likely we are to move toward a world where we relate in a more positive way to each other and a more respectful way toward each other, and move away from the old warring and tendencies toward conflict, because it is universal. Our spiritual essence is not something which can be claimed by any one particular religion. And it's, I think, the tendency toward one particular perspective claiming that their way is the way and everyone else is wrong, doesn't serve any of us. I welcome your thoughts on that, Paul.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. Like you say, no one traditional person has got the hold on everything. We're all part of the same essence, and we're all part of the same, made up, composed of the same elements and the same parts. And I think we have to live together in a. When you look at the way the world is at the moment, it's very fast paced. There's things happening all the time. It's important to preserve and to join together as many people as possible through common cause and common goodness. A bit like Rob was saying about, the sun rises in all over the world, and we're all joined by experiencing the same things, and we should all, celebrate experiencing those same things together wherever we are and however we feel. We've got to link arms and join together and, grow as a people, and hopefully by doing that, conflicts will end and the world will move towards a better future, which is essential for all of us.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Brig, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still just buzzing here, and mainly because of you both, and it was stated right at the beginning of proceedings that the love that has been generated over the years in this group. We may be small, but so many of us come from different traditions and different religious beliefs. But I would like to think that we all demonstrate that respect of our differences, and we are united in the love of the object that we pursue, which is possibly, as you've just stated, a more peaceful world, but indeed the knowledge of ourselves. And this is where it must begin, I feel, because so many of us do not have any influence in the world's global politics. So we can only adhere to perhaps the guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, be the change. And okay, people have said to me when we lived in West Wales, when my wife and I planted 1.5 acres of trees, but you'll never live to see them come to maturity, to which our reply was, no, but someone will. So let's hope that what we're trying to achieve with this wonderful group can inspire others. And I just wish that we could have a few more ladies in the group, and I know that there are those that are working on it, because the subject matter that we discuss are so profound and inspiring. Long may it continue, and many thanks to all that participate in.
Here, Brig. Well said. So as you can tell, Paul, I'm really with you. Your presentation is very, very wonderful. It's really impressive, and it's made a big, big impression today. Thank you so much for all the work you put into this. And I've also, once again, just now received an email from Alex Rafiler, who's the chief adept of the province of Greater London of the SRIA. And as he said earlier, he will be putting your paper forward for potentially for presentation at the next High Council meeting next year. And I fully support that. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful theme, wonderful subject, and very, very well presented, well researched. And yeah, thank you so much on behalf of the Metropolitan Study Group.
Well, thank you. And for me, humbling and experience, and I really appreciate it. And, being part of this group, I can feel the love, feel the wisdom, and feel the togetherness of it. And it really is been a really amazing experience for me. And what a fantastic group. And thank you so much for having me on to talk. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And to the people who maybe are there with you at the Atlantis bookstore, maybe who are attending for the first time, welcome to you all as well. It's really good to see you. You're in very good company, and I have no doubt you're going to have some wonderful conversations for the rest of the evening if you're going to be out socializing and having a bite to eat with each other. And I wish that I was there with you all. Yeah, so I think we'll close unless anybody has anything else they'd like to ask or comment upon, really. If you do, now's the time, speak up, feel free. Oh, that's a good point, actually. Somebody in the chat here, you have a wonderful message here from Isaac. Dear Frater Paul, congrats for the wonderful presentation. Looking forward to having it on YouTube to be able to share it further. Greetings from Switzerland. We also have a big thank you from Alex Rafiler as well, but there was another thing here. Yes, from Anthony. He put in the chat, a highly recommended book concerning the esoteric symbolism of the cross is by somebody called Frank C. Higgins, and he's added a link, an active link there to details of that book. So if you want to copy that information and then research that, I'm just doing that as we speak. Actually, I've copied that and I'll take a look at that myself a little later.
Will that stay in the messages so I can?
No, I can.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
And I just want to say thanks to Rob as well for helping set everything up in here. I really appreciate it. Absolute legend. Thank you.
Likewise, and lovely to see you, Rob. I wish you a wonderful time there in London, and thanks very much for your help in facilitating the meeting today. Really,
no, absolutely. This is why we do this, and there's a lot of great brothers and fraters here today, so we're going to have a good conversation.
That's great. I wish you well. I wish you a wonderful evening. So I'm just going to change the view here to the gallery view to finish off for today. Thank you to everybody who's attended, wherever you are in the world, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your weekend. Be well, peace to all of you. Have a great time. And just to let you know as well that each year in August, we have a break. So there's no study group meeting in August. And our next one is in September, the third Saturday in September, which will be September the 21st. And the title of that presentation is Synchronicity, Messages from Another Dimension by Frater Robert Mayo. Then in October, we have Was A.E. Waite a True Rosicrucian? And that is being presented by Frater R.A. Gilbert, Robert Gilbert. In November, Alchemical Utopias, which is a combination, a potent combination here of Frater Robert Gordon and Frater Jack Couch. That should be one to watch out for. And then in December, I have the pleasure and the privilege of leading the study group for a group meditation for the winter solstice. And it just so happens that this year the study group in December will take place on the midwinter solstice. And so I very much look forward to that. And I want to wish you all well. Lots of love to everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend, and yeah, be safe.